So there I was streaming over at twitch.tv/TheBlackHokage. I was just catching up on the latest and greatest in the gaming space when a viewer of mine in the chat asked if I plan to see the new Five Nights at Freddy film. Now rarely does the chat catch me off guard, but this time I have to admit they managed to put something on my radar that I was totally unaware of. I said to myself, Five Nights at Freddy film? Not only was I unaware this was releasing soon, but I was unaware that they even announced a movie. I instantly became intrigued and I decided to hop on Bing to do my research. Who am I kidding? Nobody uses Bing. I don't even know why you believe that lie. Truthfully, I hopped on Google to see what the critics had to say, and what I found was something quite interesting. At the time of this recording, the Five Nights at Freddy movie has a 26% rating from the critics and an 89% rating from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. I also found out that this movie was so good, or maybe so bad, that a fight broke out during one of the screenings of the movie.
I'm feeling so bad for the
Rarely do you see a disconnect between the critics and audience this wide, so naturally I wanted to get to the bottom of the mystery like Scooby-Doo. Is this movie flat out trash like the critics claim it to be, or is it a masterpiece like the fan base claims it to be? Well, upon completing the film, I have to say that the truth is somewhere in the middle. Five Nights at Freddy the movie is not bad, but it is painfully mid. It's a film that didn't evoke any emotion from me, so I found myself very bored watching it. I fell asleep twice watching this film, so I had to rewind it twice to make sure I didn't miss anything. And no, I wasn't tired. I watched it in the afternoon after coming off of 9 hours of sleep the previous night. So you might be wondering, what's the issue with this movie? Before we get into that, because there is a lot, at least let me share some positives. The cinematography in Five Nights at Freddy is pretty solid. I don't know what I expected, but the film looks like it had somewhat of a budget. I'd compare the camera work to something you'd see in a high-end YouTube fan-made project. Like, it's just good enough, but you can tell the budget was a bit tighter compared to other films. And same goes for the lighting. The overall aesthetic of this film they were going for, they did a great job setting the tone, and I have to commend them for that. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where the compliments end. So let's talk about the issues Five Nights at Freddy has.
And here we go.
First thing I want to touch on is the pacing. Five Nights at Freddy's runtime is 1 hour and 50 minutes, yet it feels much longer. They could have easily shaved off 20 minutes and told the same exact story. For me, it dragged because the entire plot was predictable. They spent far too much time trying to set up why our protagonist was in the restaurant versus creating cool moments once he reached his destination. Granted, I do think the plot as to why he has to work at Freddy's was solid. I'll give him that much. It just took too long to get the movie going. That slow pacing is only bogged down further by the mediocre writing. I believe the plot of this movie is actually pretty good. The issue is the writing for the interactions between the characters is weak, so it's the classic case of a good idea, but there's poor execution. An example of this poor writing is the cameo we get from Game Theory's Matt Pat. I got excited because I'm like, oh, that's a YouTuber. It's nice to see them in a movie. I know who that is. He shows up in the diner as a server. The people at the table say something, and then he responds with his YouTube catchphrase, but hey, that's just a Game Theory. I'm sitting there just watching the movie like, I really need this Hollywood's writer's strike to wrap up because it is painfully obvious some of these scripts is being written by 4th graders. This is one of those projects where, unless you have a deep connection to the Five Nights at Freddy games or internet culture as a whole, you won't find much to appreciate here. I can see some of the fans trying to argue, well, what's the issue with that? And the issue is that this is a film and not the games. Therefore, you have to make adjustments to appeal to a wider audience while trying to maintain the game's spirit. Otherwise, you get one giant inside joke that only the fans will get. The reason the Sonic and Mario movies worked is because it wasn't just fan service, but solid plots and performances from the voice actors. That brings me to my next point. Another reason the Five Nights at Freddy movie being one giant inside joke doesn't work for the mainstream is because in the midst of all the fan service, the actors forgot to act. If the acting was good, that gives the wider audience something to hold on to, but it's not good acting here. The acting in this movie ranges from mediocre to average at best. I found the protagonist of this film to be so boring. It's like he didn't even want to be there. His range of emotion ranges from Assassin's Creed 3's Connor to Watch Dogs' Aiden Pierce. Basically, he's the store brand Batman the whole film. I get he was playing a stressed out character, but he came across as bored to me. Even in the second half of the film, when things start to turn up, he barely reacts to any of the horror. I'm watching the movie wondering if this film did it have a director? Somebody got this man. As for the horror, it's generic at best. This is another huge issue I have with the movie. It's based on a horror video game, and the movie's not even remotely scary. It's your typical scares and cutaways when the horror comes into play, and some will argue the PG-13 rating held the movie back, but I'd argue back, look at Megan. That was PG-13, and it really pushed things. I thought that movie was rated R because of some of the things that was in the movie, and I didn't even know it was PG-13 until we left the theater and I saw the poster. The point is, they It didn't even bother to try to be creative with the horror, and that's just disappointing to see. On a more positive note, I would like to shout out Corey Kenshin. It was cool to see him make it into the movie. I like seeing YouTubers doing well, but what I didn't like is they put him in the trailer as a selling point, but he's barely in the movie for like 10 seconds. So I'm warning you right now, if supporting Corey Kenshin, like seeing him in the movie is one of the main reasons you want to see Five Nights at Freddy the movie, dial that expectation back real far because you're going to be severely disappointed. This is a classic case of the Hollywood bait and switch. But I think the biggest issue with the movie is Five Nights at Freddy works better as a game. Sure, there's a good amount of lore in the game, but in between you finding it, you're interacting with the game. The movie removes the interaction aspect of the franchise, and what you're left with is just an okay plot with subpar acting and dialogue. If you're gonna remove a key aspect of the series, i.e. the gameplay, then you need to make up for it everywhere else. If I had to rate this movie, I'd give it a 5 out of 10. I can't go 6 because that implies there's more positives than negatives, and that's just not true in my opinion. This film has just as many negatives as it does positives, so I feel like a 5 is a solid score because it's smack dab in the middle. This is not the worst thing I've ever watched like some of these critics are claiming on Rotten Tomatoes, but I think it'll mostly only appeal to hardcore fans of the game and kids. The good news is that the opening weekend they made $130 million, which is great considering it only cost $20 million to make the movie. It's safe to say there will probably be, whether it's for better or worse, as many movies as there are games. They just need to take the positives from this film and build upon it, because half the reason this movie succeeded, in my opinion, was the fans were just happy to see Five Nights at Freddy on the silver screen. One thing I'll give the Five Nights at Freddy fan base is they are very rabid, they support what they love, and they just wanted to see this movie. But what happens when you remove the fact that people are just happy something exists? That second and third go around, people will expect something more, and hopefully they deliver. But hey, that's just a theory. Wait, that's not my catchphrase. All right, let me try this again. What happens when you remove the fact that people are just happy something exists? That second and third go around, people will expect something more, and hopefully they deliver. But hey, I'm just saying. Now, if you made it to this part of the video, I'd like to say thank you. Please hit the like button as that helps the content reach newer audiences. And if you're new here, hey, hit the sub button as I do weekly content like this discussing pop culture. Matter of fact, I just dropped a breakdown of what made Disney Plus's Ahsoka amazing. If you're a Star Wars fan or you're just looking for something new worth watching, click the card on the screen and learn why Ahsoka's hard carrying Disney Plus right now.